Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Riiv to receive the top 10 stocks to buy right now. One segment of the market that gets a lot of attention but has been really hard to invest in over the last 100 years is airlines. And somebody that knows airlines really well is Lou Whiteman. So I had to ask Lou on to talk a little bit about the airline industry, where we are today, and sort of this strange place in the market as the Fed raises interest rates. We should be seeing airline stocks drop and travel plummet, but we're seeing the opposite. So I wanted to get a little bit of information about where we're going, where there's maybe some investment opportunities. So thanks for joining me, Lou.
Good to be here, Travis. And yeah, you were not wrong about the airlines. I'll butcher the quote, but Warren Buffett's favorite quote: if there had been a capitalist at Kitty Hawk, he would have shot the damn thing down. It was his comment. Warren Buffett burned by US Air, burned by Southwest Airlines. Warren Buffett, the one place that Warren Buffett can't make money is the airlines.
He has lost money in airlines for 30 years, and I think he's back in, right? He's back in the airline business again?
He could be. He definitely owns a lot of airline parts, which I think that's Warren Smart. But yeah, no, this has been since deregulation, since we actually let airlines start setting prices for themselves in the late 70s. Really, with the exception of Southwest Airlines, everyone has gone bankrupt, most of them twice. Everybody has lost money. And yeah, it was just this, as you say, every time the economy softens. If you or I are trying to plan our trip next summer and we're a little less sure than we were last year about income, what's a really easy thing to cut? It's the trip to Europe, right? And on a corporate level, it's the same thing. It's a lot easier to just say, all right, we're going to hold back on travel a little than it is to start laying people off. So this has always been a highly cyclical industry. And yet here we are in this market, and these guys are going nuts right now. It's been amazing to see.
What segments of the market, because there's a lot of pieces to the airline industry. There's the parts, there's the plane manufacturers, essentially Boeing and Airbus, and then there's some smaller manufacturers of smaller planes and helicopters and things like that. And then there's the airlines. Is there just rampant demand across the spectrum, and it is customers leading the way? Is that the right way to think about it? And if that's the case, what's driving that? Is it just like people were locked up for 3 months in the US and 3 years in China, and so now we're going to just have this boom time for a decade? Is that sort of the macro trend here?
So I love everything you said. A decade, we'll see, because it's so hard to predict the future. But yes, what's going on here? Mostly leisure travel. People just really missed getting out and about during COVID, and they have been resilient. The natural thing is, how long does this last, right? Because there's only so much pent-up demand. It has sustained. United Airlines, Scott Kirby, the CEO there, who is probably the smartest guy in the business, there was not one of them, he talks about new normals. And he talks about how this is permanent. And that, as an investor, that scares the heck out of me anytime someone says
I was going to say that doesn't
or
sound
new
good.
normal. But his argument is that we are living in a hybrid world. We are living in a world now where you don't necessarily just have to go on vacation June to August. The Airbnb, where they talk about people are staying longer, that people have a lot more freedom to travel as they want. They've come off of maybe a just on a human being level, a weird time where they were trapped in, where people want to explore more. That, yeah, permanence does scare me, but something has changed where we have seen demand just continue and sustain. And we are only now beginning to see business travel come back. That would just be another feather in the cap for what mostly has been an airline thing. On the supplier side, I would look to the spare parts. One thing that happened in COVID is airlines parked a ton of planes. So they have been able to ramp back using existing equipment. The Boeings of the world took on a ton of debt just to survive. It's a buyer's market for planes right now. So I don't know about Boeing is really getting in on it other than to get running to standstill or get back to treading water. But for these airlines, gosh, it's been a year.
So thinking about this new normal kind of concept, because you're right. You say that, and my reflex is to say like, oh my goodness, this is going to end terribly, because every time somebody says new normal, it ends up not being. E-commerce in the last 12 months, we've seen that we didn't actually have a new normal. We just went back to the same baseline. I remember in the Great Recession, we had that new normal concept of, well, we're going to have high unemployment and all these. It took 6 months to realize that was not actually going to happen. I want to touch on two things. One, from a bullish side, I do buy the idea that if we're at a more work from home environment, I think more people are going to go back to the office, but there's going to be more flexibility. And so as a result, it's probably the case that yes, vacations are more flexible. But the other thing I want to add to that is if you're running a company or starting a company, let's say you have 10 employees and they're all over the world. Well, what do you want to do to build a culture? Once or twice a year, you want to get together and actually see everybody, meet everybody. And so that's one of those business travel things that I think, well, maybe we don't talk about enough is why is a place like Las Vegas booming? Because where are you going to go meet up with everybody? Well, that's a natural pick. It's like Miami or Las Vegas or one of the big cities in Europe or Asia. But I think that's the bullish case. The thing that I worry about is you look at the charts on consumer credit and the amount of debt. People were saving money during the pandemic because we weren't spending on things like travel. There were stimulus checks, so people had excess cash. They started spending that. And then it's hard to stop spending. So then you start taking out debt. And that seems to be exactly what's happening over the last 6 months to a year. So that would be maybe the bearish side. But is it just a balance of those two things that we need to think about? And maybe between the two, we kind of end up in a pretty good spot?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you make a lot of good points there, and again, just the permanency. Nothing is permanent, but just to put some numbers to it, because if it was just a simple, we didn't spend anything in 2020, it should have faded by now. And to use United, because as we're recording this, United just in the last 24 hours released fourth quarter earnings. Capacity is still down versus 2019. Within airlines, we mostly look at comparisons to 2019 now.
So is that because of
Pre-pandemic, right?
pilots?
Pilots, a lot of it is pilots, a lot of it is equipment. United has a very old fleet and they need to renew it. But capacity
Gotcha.
is down, I think, 9-10% compared to the fourth quarter of 2019. Some of that too is, look, China isn't quite back, so some of what they were
Yeah.
flying back then isn't back. Europe is still weird. But with capacity down 10%, total operating revenue was up 14%. So that
Mhm.
gives you an idea of the pricing power that they still have, even in this inflationary environment, even where the personal savings rate is down. United is also guiding for revenue 50% year over year up in this first quarter. So again, as far as will we see issues? Probably, maybe, you'd think. But are we seeing it yet? No. I mean, as far as what can go wrong, though, I mean, look, there's still a lot that can go wrong from here, right? For one thing, as this industry has always shown us, there are a lot of highly paid unionized groups that can see this too. Delta disappointed with their guidance at first quarter, basically because Delta was the first to come up with a new deal with their pilots, and we're going to see some of those added costs coming in as soon as the first quarter. United, American, some of those aren't there yet. It's coming. So we are sort of in this sweet spot here now where revenue and profitability is up on these high fares, but it hasn't flown through to labor, which is going to be a great equalizer. So we have that. We have we don't know where the economy is going. I, like you, remain at least somewhat skeptical that the consumer can hold up if this drags into 2023. I'll say
Mhm.
this to the industry's credit, I guess, and I don't know, as a consumer I like this, but as an investor I really do. As recently as 10, 15 years ago, there were 10 airlines, like legacy airlines, that were out there, and just think of the names that has disappeared from this industry in just since the late aughts. Northwest Airlines up in your neck of the wood, Continental, U.S. Airways, America West, all of the AirTran, all of these great names. Right now, four companies have 80% of the domestic market. All of these are much better run than they were in the 80s, where it used to be we had CEOs that seemingly just liked looking at pretty maps, and they were
Mhm.
willing to go to negative earnings if it meant keep your market share. Those days are gone, and I don't think they're coming back. I think that this now kind of consolidated industry has both the monopoly power, I guess, or duopoly power to kind of control where they go in a downturn and the discipline not to get in pricing. So I do think the cycle of every time there's a downtime, there's bankruptcies. I think that's over. I think we're in a better new normal, but I'd be surprised if the new normal looks as good as it does right now.
Yeah, I can't get over the China piece of it too. I don't know what the impact is going to be for domestic airlines, but a billion people coming out of a zero COVID policy. People went crazy in the US. I follow Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is 30% higher than it has ever been, ever. We were basically flat in Las Vegas from 2005 to 2019. And then suddenly we come out of the pandemic and 2021 is a record year. So if you're looking at this space and you say, I'm interested in getting exposure to the airline business, maybe the travel business, this theme of people working from home and going to conferences or meetups with coworkers, maybe traveling more for leisure. If that's a theme you think is going to last for the next 10 or 20 years, where is the best place to be investing?
So it's hard to say, especially back to the China thing. It's just, yeah, because it's really hard to figure out how to invest in any airline anywhere, not just a U.S. airline, to capitalize on the whole globe. That's where I kind of go back to parts and stuff. But I do believe that, yes, we are seeing the world has changed and we are growing from here. I mean, Travis, you and I have talked about before, but companies like part suppliers, TransDigm, which is stock I own, some of these AerCap that's going to finance, which I think we find a video, we talk about all these, where I do think that if you're playing global trends, it's hard to do with a single company because we are all these companies by international law are tied to a geography. But there are real trends here. And I do think, like we said, with hybrid work with you, there are real interesting possibilities even on an individual company level.
So the right move is a basket, I think, is kind of what you're saying, is maybe the suppliers. Is staying away from Boeing the right answer? Would that be kind of the one segment of the market you want to say, like, if I want to manufacture, I want to do a TransDigm or a Hiko or something like that?
Theoretically, Boeing and Airbus have a global duopoly. And for all the efforts to kind of break that up, I mean, it's China is leading the way. I don't really see in the next kind of foreseeable future Chinese-made airlines flying between New York and Italy and kind of disrupting the market. So in theory, I would love to say, but the problem is one of those companies, Airbus, is still sort of a government creation out of Europe. So you always have to be, they're getting much better at that. But I mean, it is really hard for Airbus to do what makes sense for the business in terms of right sizing, things like that, just because there are so many government pressures on there. Boeing, to me, is the equivalent of General Electric for the last decade. Until I see for sure that there isn't another squeaky wheel, I can't get. Boeing looks cheap from here, but Boeing, between the 737 MAX, between all of the issues on their military side, where their military tanker came in 2x what it was budgeted for. They were responsible for all of that overage. And then when they finally started delivering them, they had to take them out of service because they had forgotten to clean out parts. There was junk literally in the tank. Boeing, I need a couple of good years of Boeing saying, yes, we know what we're doing. I do. I like the part suppliers. I do think you can buy well-run airlines and do well. With well-run, I would say Delta. I would say United is growing on my list. Southwest, who's been everybody's favorite for a decade, I don't think they're going to fall off a cliff, but Southwest is grown up. And they're facing some of the same growing pains that others did before. So yeah, I do think you can buy, but I would hate to try to invest in all of these trends we're talking about by just picking any one company, be it a Boeing, be it a Delta, or be it even one of these really well-run parts suppliers. I do like the basket here.
Yeah, I think that is right and sounds good. I think we'll see how this macro economy and travel trends change and impact, because this is typically a very cyclical business. If these companies can get through a down cycle in 2023, if there is one, goodness, it may be a great next decade, because a growing economy is going to mean even more demand. So I like that basket approach. Well, thanks for giving us a background on the airline industry and some of the players there. I hope this was helpful for you, because it is for me to learn about this. Leave your comments in the comments section below. Follow Riiv Investing here, and I will see you here next time.